Hey guys, and thanks for joining us today for Cyber Talk with me, Julia Lee, Senior Manager of the Education and Center of Excellence Unit here within the Cybersecurity Division at the Ontario Public Service. Today's topic is cybercrime prevention. And what is the first thing you think of when you hear the word cybercrime? To me personally, I think cybercrime really represents a significant and really growing challenge in our interconnected digital world. And as we're seeing that technology advances, there's also opportunities for really malicious actors to exploit vulnerabilities for financial gain, political motives, or personal satisfaction. And really, the consequences of cybercrime we're seeing, it's far-reaching, impacting individuals, businesses, and even governments. It's a scary thing, but there are many ways you can really prevent it from happening to you and really the people around you. And today we are very privileged to have Scott with us. Scott is a leading cybercrime prevention keynote speaker here in the US, and he is joining us to share his wealth of knowledge gained through his 30 years of experience as a retired FBI supervisory special agent. That is a long title there, Scott. So definitely big shoes to fill, and to speak on how we can enhance our cybersecurity mindset. Welcome, Scott. How are you today?
It's great to see you. We had a fun We had a fun recording. What was it, just a couple of weeks ago?
That's right. You were on our Ontario's Community of Practice, and we're bringing you back on our Cyber Talk.
I am so thrilled. I met so many cool people. I had so many questions, and it was just great to, yeah, as a retired FBI agent who was in Syracuse, New York for many years, I did a lot of work with my friends up in Canada, a lot of cross-border stuff. I spent some time when I was with the FBI at the legal attaché in Toronto and worked about cybercrime. So it's great to be back here with you again, and I look forward to this discussion. We're gonna have we're gonna have a good time today.
It's a highly anticipated one, Scott. So thanks very much in advance for taking the time to be on our show today. So we're pivoting things over. If you know me and you've been watching some of our episodes by now, you know that I love stats. So before we get into the questions, I really wanted to start off by sharing a few stats I found on cybercrime. So let's get ready for it, guys. Did you know that every 39 seconds there is a cyber attack? The global average cost of a cyber breach is actually $3.9 million across SMEs, which is astounding. And most companies take nearly 6 months to really detect a data breach, even the major ones. So that definitely there's going to be there's a lot of alarming stats out there. But behold, we're going to be talking about some solutions throughout this episode here, and then working together, of course, in our kind of ecosystem of cybersecurity. Here is what we do here at the Center of Excellence. Um, Last but not least, 4 million files are stolen every day, and that's really equates to about 44 every second. So I don't mean to scare you, but of course, when it comes to education awareness, there needs to have some fear into cybersecurity for us to kind of get across our education awareness tips and advice. But these are some really shocking but true facts about cyber crimes in this year alone. But let's get to know a little bit more about what cybercrime is exactly. So to kick things off, Scott, can you provide a concise definition of cybercrime and highlight some of the most prevalent types in today's digital landscape, setting the stage for our discussion on tracking, preventing, and supporting professionals in this ever-evolving space?
Well, in the old days, I started my career as an FBI agent in 1995. And if you would ask me to define the role of an FBI agent in 95, it was easy. Bad people did bad things to good people in my area of responsibility. And I worked with state and local cops, and we put bad guys in jail. And what was the most common form? Somebody would walk into a bank, they'd put a gun up to the teller and say, "Give me your money." And there was a famous analogy of a bank robber by the name of Willie Sutton who robbed banks in the 70s. And when they arrested Willie, they asked Willie, "Why did you rob a bank?" And Julia, let's see, why did he rob the bank?
You have more financial freedom?
Well, no, because that's where the money was, right? The money's at the bank, so he robs a bank. But where's the money today? The money today is floating in cyberspace. And that is really now these cyber criminals are targeting us, our businesses, our family for theft, financial theft. In the old days, we looked at teenage hackers living in our base in their mom's basement. Today, all cybercrime is financially motivated. So let's like talk about the thing of hacking. Hacking is, getting into systems. Cybercrime is different. And during my decades with the FBI, I've interviewed almost 1,000 cybercrime victims, maybe even more, from government agencies to some of the largest companies in the United States, to parents whose kids were injured, to the elderly who lost their entire life savings, to victims of romance scams. So any kind of scam that could take place in the real world, it's being facilitated by a computer. And let me share with you one of my stats that I've learned during my career, because we hear this all the time. I got into cybercrime in 2003 as my core competency, and all my friends made fun of me because they said the cybercrime problem was going to go away by 2007, and it would be solved by a lot of really smart people with technology. How's that working out for any of us? It's not. The problem keeps getting worse year after year. But one of the things that I discovered, and I wrote a book called The Secret to Cybersecurity. And, and when I named it The Secret, I didn't really have a secret. I just stole it from Oprah, who said that, if you write a book with the name Secret. But the secret to cybersecurity is that 90% of what I dealt with across the board easily could have been prevented if my end users were only armed with a couple of key pieces of information. And I retired in 2018, and I live a passion project life. And what I do is I try to help people share my stories and give them the information that they need. Am I saying we don't need products and services? Of course not. All I'm saying, and this is what I want to get out today, if you don't do what I tell you to do for free, I don't really care what you spend money on. So that's kind of really where I sit. And that's why I'm excited to talk to you, to give everyone some really good actionable items of things that they need to do, because I call it the cyber secure mindset, not a product, not a service, just a way of thinking. And that's really what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. That's an astounding stat. 90% of cyber crimes can be prevented just by education and awareness. And some of the major cyber crimes that we're seeing here, Scott, the Center of Excellence, and the ones we'd like to raise awareness on in our educational materials is, of course, phishing, malware, ransomware. Those have been around for ages, but definitely with social engineering attacks, it's definitely advanced with the use of technology and AI. And one of the main ways, really, we're trying to prevent these crimes from happening to you is simply being aware of them, right? So just like to your point, awareness is key now for every organization in the public and private sector, and really understanding what these forms of cyber attacks are and ways to avoid them from happening. So
Sure.
for instance, when we like to teach, people how to look out for phishing emails, and if an email is sent from someone you do not know, we always advise people verify the source, check if there's a sense of urgency in the email, or even hover over the links in the emails to make sure it's from a trusted source. But it's definitely gone beyond that now. So those are just some of the basic
Oh,
tips that you
my.
look out for.
And let me just share a story with you just of what happened the other day, because, I always say social engineering is the number one tool in the cyber criminals tool belt. We have our phishing, and now we want to verify the senders, but a lot of email compromises are happening. So what we see is someone's legitimate email comes in. So you get an email from somebody you know and somebody you trust, and they tell you to change the dollar amount on an invoice. That's not getting picked up by technology. We're dealing with text messages, we're dealing with telephone calls. But just last week, I got another victim situation, and I hate these because I can't help my victims. So I want to really kind of share this with everyone today. So imagine this, and it could be anyone. This victim, who was in her late 60s, goes to Google and types in Amazon Prime deals. Now, Julia, is that out of the ordinary for somebody to go to Google and type in Amazon Prime deals?
I don't think so. I think that's definitely
No.
prime time during Black Friday, which is around the
Yeah.
corner, or during
Could
the holiday season.
could happen to any of us. So she goes to Google, types in Amazon Prime deals, And the first thing is a sponsored ad. So she clicks on it because it's in Google, right? We have to trust Google. She clicks on the link, goes to the website, and all of a sudden a pop-up shows up on her bottom right hand in her thing saying that, hey, this is Amazon security. Somebody has tried to break into your account. Please contact the 1-800 number. So unfortunately, what do you think this trusting individual does?
What did they do?
Contacts the 1-800 number, right? So she calls the 1-800 number, speaks to what she thinks is Amazon security, who convinces her that the bad guys have gotten into her bank account. And at the end of the day, she was out $125,000. And I hate to say it because one of the things that I've realized during my career with the FBI is when the bad guys steal your money, and she actually took money out of her bank account, purchased gold bars, and then had them delivered somewhere. It's gone. And then we were able to trace this information back and it went overseas. So bad guys steal your stuff. You're not getting it back. Putting the bad guys in jail is hard, but that thing could have been prevented with the right education.
That's right. It really goes to show, and thank you for sharing that example, Scott. It shows, double check or triple check all your emails or smishing or every
And pop-ups
form of social
too.
engineering.
Like I haven't talked about that, and I do training all the time. And what am I telling people? Be careful. Think before you click. Think before you act. Now I have to tell people, think before you use Google, because what did the cyber criminals do? They went out and they purchased a sponsored domain with a stolen credit card. So whenever anyone types in Amazon Prime deals, it's going to go here. Here's another example. So you go to the website and it says, in order to get your Amazon Prime deal, please log into your Amazon account with your username and password. Most people are going to believe that. And then
Mhm.
once the bad guy steals it, it's game over. So we have to be aware these scams are going on. Really just log in. If you need to get into Amazon, go on your phone, go to the website. Don't go through the browser, through a search engine.
Absolutely. I was just going to ask you if you had any tips for our audience today, but like you said there, think before you click, think twice before your information is stolen from a cyber criminal. But now that we've kind of broken down what cybercrime is, let's talk about the steps into identifying how a cyber attack occurs. So some experts specialize in digital forensics, which is the practice of identifying, acquiring, and analyzing electronic devices. But in the world of cyber, how do digital forensics experts trace the footsteps of online criminals? And what cutting edge techniques are they using to stay ahead, Scott?
Well, here's the thing. When you have to bring digital forensics in, it's game over. You lost. And digital forensics is so important. I was just talking to an organization yesterday who had to go over and pay a lot of money to get the digital forensics teams to really get in. I managed a digital forensics team for the FBI, and digital forensics is so important. I like to say it occurs like when your house is burning, you're bringing in your forensics people. But let's talk about how not to bring in the forensics people. Because now a majority of the cybercrime victimizations that I have been dealing with occur because somebody has stolen a username and password. Because let's think about it. What happens if a cyber criminal steals your username and password for your bank account, Julia? What are they going to get?
All of your banking information and your personal information and access to everything.
Yeah. Okay. We're familiar with platforms like CRMs, like Salesforce and stuff like that. Are you familiar with that?
Yep. Yeah.
What happens if the bad guy gets access to your username and password for your CRM? What is he going to get?
That's a very good question. What, Scott?
Everything, everything, all of your customer information. I've seen the cyber criminals get into HR platforms, and I've seen them log into Microsoft Outlook and Gmail accounts, and all they need is a stolen username and password. I talk to a lot of the digital forensics companies today, and that's accounting for maybe about 60% of their intrusion response. So before you go out and you do that, let's just make sure we're doing a couple of these things that are safe and secure. Because my goal, and I mean, when you get to the point, digital forensics is so important. But when somebody steals your username and password, and I sit here and I talk to companies that this happens all the time, we need to make sure that we're securing everything with what we call two-factor authentication, which is a second form besides just your username and password, because the bad guys will steal your username and password. And that second form of authentication, which is either a text message, which is the least secure, to an app on your phone or a hardware token, is so important. So that's really kind of where I see a lot of the landscape going, is just let's do the simple things first. I mean, with digital forensics, there's so many different ways that through my digital forensic friends that we've been able to see that the cyber criminals, once they get into your network, they're able to move laterally. But a lot of times it's really starting with that stolen credential. So really important things.
So let me ask you this in terms of AI, a hot topic. It's here to stay. It's opening up a whole new world for us in our digital space. Do you see AI being positive or a negative source to digital forensics, and how?
I see what we see now is that cybercrime is becoming like a division of labor where the bad guys are using what we know as affiliate models. So they're going out and they're subcontracting everything out, where there are reconnaissance teams, there are other teams. But let's think about this. Even ransomware, a majority of ransomware occurs because an email was sent. So AI is helping so much the cyber criminals, because now they're able to craft these really great looking emails that are really, really convincing. And now they're moving into the world where they're able to replicate our voices. So
Mhm.
I do see great things happening. It's like kind of like it would almost be like saying, like, look, if we didn't have computers, we wouldn't have cybercrime, but look at the great stuff. So that's where we have to start balancing it. So when I really want people to think about AI is able to get into the hands of very unsophisticated computer users who can take that and weaponize that against victims. And they can go to websites right now. They can go to a company's website, figure out who all the executives are, and send very, very targeted emails.
Absolutely. Yeah, AI is definitely, and I agree with you, it's helping cyber criminals really craft more convincing ways to trick people into revealing their situation. And it's really important for us to understand how a cyber attack were to occur in this instance. But it's even better. Of course, we talk a lot on this show here about prevention from a cybercrime from happening in the first place. And one way organizations can do this is through ethical hacking practices, which we have a team here, ethical hacking team, that does just that into our organizations, that hack into it ethically, hence why the ethical hacking name. And this is when authorized personnel really attempt to gain unauthorized access to a computer system, your application, or your data. And these individuals, they're mimicking the efforts of malicious attackers by trying to hack into your systems to understand where improvements can be made to create more of a cyber secure environment. So what role does ethical hacking play in preventing cybercrime, Scott? And how can individuals really, who are interested in this field, train to become ethical hackers to defend against online threats?
Yeah, the ethical hacking is such an important tool. And, a lot of times we're also calling this penetration testing, where what is happening is an organization is bringing in a third party with authorization to test their systems. But a lot of the things that I see, and I've seen this for years, is they go through the penetration test, because a lot of companies, and especially here in the United States, say that, look, part of your mandate is you need a pen test. I'm like, okay, so they go out, they get a pen test. They find 135 things that are wrong that they can't afford to fix, and then they wait until next year to do another penetration test. So that becomes a little problematic for me. And what I tell everyone over here is find the results. I mean, the pen test always find the same results. The ethical hacker should be working a little more diligently. And part of the plan is, okay, so if every company has the same top 10 findings, why don't we fix those findings?
Mhm.
Because if you go over and you do this and you don't do anything about it, somebody's going to, in the legal world is going to say, hey, how come you didn't do anything to address this stuff?
Mhm.
The pen testers told you that you had a problem. You better do something about it. And I'm here to tell you, it's not easy. It's really, really difficult because organizations just had, as I would say when I was with the FBI, we in law enforcement cannot arrest our way out of the problem. You in the private sector can't spend your way out of this problem. That's why we need a mindset shift to change the way we are doing things, because the cybercrime problem continues to get worse year after year, and we continue to spend money on different products and services. And all I'm trying to say is, hey, just do what I tell you to do for free. And it's not rocket science. I've identified patterns of victimization, and these patterns are doing, so take these patterns, and I'll hand these out to everyone. I'll give you a way to contact me. I put together a report on this, and just start working it that way. Do these things first.
Absolutely. When the pest testing team comes in, identifies your vulnerabilities, some assessments that you probably is not to your liking, please take the appropriate steps. Find out the appropriate teams to get that support. Whether it's contacting us at the Center of Excellence, we're always happy to kind of share some of our best practices. But speaking of which, in terms of the cybersecurity division, a team that's dedicated to vulnerability management and ethical hacking, we're always looking for people to join the team. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out to us at cybersecurity@ontario.ca. But based on a survey done by SANS Institute, we're seeing that around 40% of ethical hackers said they could break into most environments they test, if not all environments. And we're seeing that nearly 6% said they need 5 hours or less to break into a corporate environment once they identify a weakness. So, this just really shows how vulnerable most organizations are and how easy it is for real hackers to get into them, and especially when you're not taking the appropriate steps to counter the steps and advice that the pen test team had advised. So now, Scott, with your background, and a very interesting background, by the way, you're a retired FBI agent, and I'm sure you have many stories from your days on the job. And I think you shared with us just a very sneak glimpse of it. Can you share with us one of the most interesting cases you dealt with that helped influence your daily life today, and maybe something you never thought you would be able to leverage?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, and this is kind of part of my journey. And so I start as a young FBI agent. I don't join the FBI to work cybercrime. I'm working bank robberies. I'm working fugitives. I'm dealing with smuggling cases across the St. Lawrence River with my RCMP buddies and my OPP buddies, getting stuck in snowstorms in like April. And so I get into the world of cybersecurity in 2003, and everybody makes fun of me. They tell me the cybercrime problem is going away. And then, and when I get to Nashville in 2007 and I'm the cybercrime supervisor, I'm trying to educate people, and nobody wants to take my advice. I was giving out advice on the business email compromise and ransomware in 2016. And I couldn't even get people to sit with me to say that this was a problem. I was talking to healthcare in about 2016 again, and I'm going to share with you an article on in 2016. I'm addressing a major healthcare consortium saying, guys, you got to take this seriously. There's problems, it's doing it, and nobody is listening. So I go out and I think I'm going to really be a rock star in the world of cybercrime. in 2003. I get to Nashville and I am like, all right, I got all this criminal experience. I got a team. I'm learning cybercrimes in its infancy. And what happens? I interview 1,000 victims. None of my victims expect to be a victim. I can't get their money back. I can't put the bad guys in jail because the bad guys are all located overseas. And I'm sitting with this gentleman one day and I'm sitting with the family because this individual, and I've dealt with so many corporate breaches, and I didn't lose any sleep when big companies or governments were hacked. Why? Because here I am, I'm with this one gentleman who again goes to Google, finds an investment advisor, wire transfers $700,000, his entire life savings. Okay. Imagine if it's one of our parents, they take their entire life savings, they give it, they work so hard, and they sit here and they give it to an investment advisor, and the money goes around the world and we lose track over it in Eastern Europe. And this was my typical life. This was what was happening every day. And I'll never forget sitting with the family, and they beat me up pretty badly because they were like, "You're the FBI. You got all this power. What do you mean you can't get my dad's money back? What do you mean you can't put the bad guys in jail?" And it really got me depressed. And I wanted to put my arm around them and say, if you just would have done these couple of things, your dad wouldn't have been a victim. And that's when I had that major epiphany in my life about 2016. And that became my calling.
Mhm.
And, you know, I provide training to organizations. I go around the country. I speak at conferences. But at the end of the day, all I'm trying to do, and I post stuff on LinkedIn, I want to tell the world that you don't have to be the next cybercrime victim. And I really think it was just from, you know, and just recently I spoke to a victim, and they begged me because their father lost $1.2 million. And there's tears in this person's eyes. You know, I'm on the phone and you could see the devastation, and I can't get their money back. I can't put the bad guys in jail, but it could have been prevented. So that's really where I live my life. And that's why I'm so passionate about what I do. And then I've taken that and I've been able to transform that into helping companies change the mindset of an organization. Because we can get as much penetration testing, risk assessments, we can buy things. But if I can get into an organization and teach them how to be safe at home and how to keep their kids safe and their elderly parents safe, they're going to do that at work. So that's kind of where I live. So I don't have any great victim stories. I was talking to a school yesterday and they said, well, tell us about a cybercrime story where you saved the day. I was like, I almost had to make one up because I never saved the day. I always got brought in a little too late.
Yeah,
Today, I could save the day.
absolutely. Today you are, and you're going to
I
continue
hope
doing so
so.
with raising awareness. But an interesting point you raised around, your part of your role now, Scott, is going out to organizations and trying to change the mindset. I'm just curious to know, is there any challenges you face, any pushbacks, common pushbacks you get from organizations as you're going out and advising them?
I live in this weird universe where I shouldn't say fortunately or unfortunately, and this is where I'm trying to change it. I don't want to say I am not in the cybersecurity awareness business, okay? Because cybersecurity awareness, unfortunately, is an afterthought. And I've gotten brought in, so they go like this: "Hey, Scott, can you come in and can you uh, talk to our company?" And I spend an hour or two. Everyone's all completely motivated. And then 3 days later, everybody forgets what I do, but they check the box. So
Mhm.
it's like one of the things that I'm trying to figure out is how do I create a new category in the marketplace where, and I've done it through what I call the cyber secure mindset, where it's like, look, you can get all this information. So small companies call me up, they go, hey, can we hire you? And I don't have the ability to do that. I go, just go to LinkedIn, watch all my videos. I provide videos almost 3 or 4 times a week on steps that companies can take to keep themselves safe. Because the cybersecurity awareness marketplace is not, they are not stepping up and providing relevant content to people. So everybody just wants to check a box. Everybody wants a magic pill to do things. But I'm going to be honest, this takes work. It's like the same thing of working out and going to the gym. I can't get anyone to do chin-ups for me, even though I hate doing chin-ups, and I can do maybe 3. I can do sets of 3. I'm getting better.
I don't believe you. I'm sure you're fantastic at it, Scott. Thanks for sharing that. That's wonderful. I know many of our listeners here are students who are interested in getting into the cybersecurity field. So my next question for you, Scott, is as cyber threats evolve, what strategies can aspiring cybersecurity professionals really use to prepare themselves for the dynamic nature of this field?
Well, I think this is a fast growing field, but I think before we look into the future, let's look into the past. And what do I mean by that? If you would have been to one of my presentations in 2014, I'm still talking about the same exact stuff. I'm still talking about social engineering is the #1 threat. I'm talking about the account compromise leading to a majority of data breaches. I'm talking about the fact that way too many people are using the same password from multiple platforms. I'm talking about the lack of two-factor authentication and the reliance on tools, because most people are, like we talked about earlier when we started this off. Look at the email. If you get an email from somebody you don't know, and I always say you're not getting an email from Boris Badnoff at cybercriminal.org. You are going to get an email on next Tuesday, which is in the US, the day after Cyber Monday, and it's going to say your Amazon package has been delayed in shipping. Please click on the link. As companies are spending more and more money to stay safe, the cyber criminals are going after the end users. So we have to look at the past before we sit here and we start developing new methodologies and new technologies. We have to have that mindset, because there's not one product, there's not one piece of technology. And I think we're looking for technology that's going to help our brains. And I don't think we're there yet.
Mhm.
Because if the bad guys can't get you on email, they're going to get you on your cell phone. If they can't get you on your cell phone, they're going to call you. If they're not going to call you, they're going to get you on LinkedIn. You're going to, especially for my college students here, be really careful on employment scams, where all of a sudden you're looking and you get contacted by a recruiter who has you fill out an application and say, hey, provide your name, date of birth, social security number, and all this stuff. And hey, provide us your bank account information. Verify, verify, and verify.
Yeah, absolutely. Verify as they're targeting the end users. And really to add on what you said, I think it's important to be flexible and keep an open mind. And the work within cybersecurity, it's not a regular 9 to 5 job. We know cybersecurity, the field, I still say it, I still believe it's still fairly new. It's agile and we need to be ready for change when something happens. And I like to say that no day will be the same in cybersecurity. And certainly that is very true here at the Center of Excellence. So thanks, Scott. And for our last question, I asked to all of our guests on the Cyber Talk Show, I'm very curious to see what your response will be for this answer, really given your vast background and experience in the cyber field. What is the best cybersecurity advice you can give or have ever received?
I tell people the thing that I do is keep your family safe first. Take what you learn and apply it to so many of us have to keep our kids safe. So many of us have to keep our parents safe. My pieces of advice that I would see: none of my victims had two-factor authentication in place, especially on all of their personal accounts. So if you are going there into the field of cybersecurity, make sure that you got to put the mask on yourself, And those are the things that we should be doing. And I go to conferences. I had a cybersecurity salesperson call me up the other day, worked for a pretty big company, sold a really big product. They got their Amazon account compromised and the hours and hours it took to fix it. And I asked one question: did you have two-factor authentication on it? Like, no. It's like, okay, let's start. We got to do the basics. We got to do the fundamentals. So important.
Absolutely. Always got to do our due diligence on that. And of course, I think you mentioned this a number of times in our chat today. Use two-factor authentication. It's such a simple tool, but many people still are not on board with it. So that is the simplest way that you can start getting a little bit more cyber secure and a little bit more cyber safe. So at this point, Scott, this concludes all the questions that I have for you. And I see that there's a ton of questions from our audience now that have been
Great.
patiently waiting. So we'll pivot over to my favorite part of our chat today is our Q&A from our audience. Starting with the first question here from an audience member. How crucial is hands-on experience or practical application of knowledge in cybersecurity? And how can newcomers gain this experience effectively?
Okay, that is a great one here. In the US especially, there's a lot of work being done at our community college level to provide people with, the basic skill set that is required. But if you want to be an expert in the field of cybersecurity, I would go to Google every single morning and I would go to news and I would type in cybercrime. And I would read every single article that I could find and find the commonalities. And think about it, 90% and do it, read, become an expert on cybersecurity prevention. Follow me on LinkedIn. You can go to my website. I love to answer questions. I'm blessed. I got into the FBI when I was 20 years old, right out of community college, because my mother filled out an application for me to become a file clerk, which is a clerical employee. So if there's anyone out there, and I offer this to anyone, if you're a young student or looking about that, hit me up on LinkedIn, send me a message. I'd be love to help you and share my experiences.
I'm sure many people will take you up on that offer there, especially you're very active on LinkedIn there, Scott. And LinkedIn is a great source of information as well, right? So follow that. There's a bunch of podcasts now. There's a book that's right behind Scott here they can take up on just to sort of continue to be up to date with cybersecurity trends and news. Our second question is, given the human element in cyber breaches, what educational or behavioral changes should individuals and organizations prioritize to enhance cybersecurity?
It's really kind of changing the culture. And how do we change the culture? We have to change it at the top of the organization. We have to get the buy-in. I get brought in all the time to talk to C-suites all the time. And these are companies that say, I don't want to use two-factor authentication. It's too difficult. But then I bring them into my loop, which is bad guys steal your stuff. And I want you to think about this. Bad guys steal your stuff. You're not getting your stuff back. Putting bad guys in jail is hard because they're located overseas, but most of it could be prevented. So when I teach people and I explain to them that if you don't have two-factor authentication on your Gmail account, the bad guys are going to log in remotely. They're going to get access to your browser. They're going to steal all your usernames and passwords. They're going to log into your bank account and take your money, and nobody can help you. However, if you just do a couple of simple things, it doesn't have to happen. So my whole thing that I do is I try to empower people. So when I'm sitting with the leadership of an organization and I'm sharing with them tips on keeping their elderly parents safe and their kids safe and their personal bank account, and then I go, well, what about your workers? I go, isn't this important? What about the information that your company holds? Because I'm dealing with a lot of healthcare companies here in the US who do not have two-factor authentication, and the bad guys are able to get a password off of the dark web, log in remotely, and get access to healthcare information.
Oh, that's incredible. Our next question is around vulnerabilities. Are there particular industries or sectors, and I'm curious about this one too, more vulnerable to cyber attacks due to the adoption of newer technology, Scott?
I like to say that, one of the things that I've heard all the time in my career, and I call this the first truth of cybersecurity, is none of my victims ever expected to be a victim. They didn't think they fit the victim profile. So let me just walk you through this. So as I'm interviewing victims, I'm going out and talking to companies. And I would say, do you think you fit the victim profile? No, of course not. Why not? I'm a small business. Nobody targets small businesses. I'm a nonprofit organization. Why would anyone want to target a nonprofit organization? I'm a religious organization. The cyber criminals would never do that. Then I would talk to small municipalities and they would go, well, we're not as big as the city of Nashville, which has 1.5 million people. We only have 23,000. Why would anyone want to target us? And those were my worst victims. So in Nashville, I went out and we have publicly traded companies. So there's a group of companies that are traded on the NASDAQ stock exchange, which is the smaller stock exchange. So I would go out and talk to them. And I would say, are you concerned about becoming a victim? No. I go, why not? Well, we're only on the NASDAQ stock exchange. You need to talk to companies on the New York Stock Exchange. Okay. So I would talk to companies on the New York Stock Exchange, and they would give me these crazy reasons. The best one I've ever got was, we're a $5.7 billion company. Why would anyone want to target us? And I didn't get a lack of concern. And Nashville was the Silicon Valley of healthcare, which was in 2017, we started seeing breaches from the People's Republic of China. So I'm going over and educating them. And then I'm talking to cleared defense contractors. And my whole thing here is and this is the statement I say, the cyber criminals do not care who you are. They don't care the size of your organization. They want access to your stuff. And it's the same thing with a company. When I would do employee training, I would have people who would go, well, I'm just an intern. I don't make, I'm
We
not
hear
this
that all the
big.
time. Yeah.
So that's why we have to get that through on the first truth about cybersecurity. None of my victims ever felt they fit the victim profile. We can't use that to be able to say that. And even when I was dealing with it and the cleared defense contractors, and because here's what happened, we were starting to see a lot of targeted attacks against the US military in 2006. So what did the US military do? They tied up their defenses. So what did the bad guys do? They went after the cleared defense contractors. So everyone moved there. Then the big cleared defense contractors tightened up. So then they went down to the smaller ones, to the people who were just making the widget that went into the component box that went into a fighter jet. So they're always trying to target us. And it goes back to the fourth truth. Most of it could have been prevented. Let's start thinking about the mindset shift.
Absolutely. And so fitting that this episode is all about the mindset changes, because that is definitely kind of key in all the scenarios that you've pretty much laid out here, Scott. Um, there are more questions here, but I do apologize, guys. We are running out of time. We can continue this conversation going on and on, I think, with between Scott and I here.
Yeah.
In today's discussion, we defined cybercrime, how FBI agents define crime as, bad people doing bad things to good people, to all the way to really changing that mindset to cybercrime are scams that take place in a real world that are facilitated through computers, and that 90% of cybercrimes could be prevented if end users have just cyber awareness. Sounds easier than it is, because it is
It-
very easy.
yeah,
Education awareness is
we did
found.
oversimplify the problem just a little bit, but we got to start somewhere, Julia.
Exactly, exactly. There's a ton of resources out there now, and in a quick Google search, you can see there's a ton of free resources out there to really help the cyber ecosystem. We even talked about our digital forensics. When you bring in digital forensic, and it means you lost, and how to not bring in forensics, and making sure that you were continuing to use multi-factor authentication. We would touch a little bit on, your thoughts on AI there, Scott. So thanks very much for some of your predictions there, and some of your perspectives on how AI, it's really a convincing way to trick people into revealing their information, which is true, but we're seeing that it's definitely going to have more advancements later on, which I'm excited to talk about. Maybe we'll bring you back onto the show to define that. To lastly, really just pushing back on organizations. So making sure that cybercrime, we understand that it takes work and it's not just checking the boxes. And I love that advice there, because I think many smaller organizations, not to put them on the spot here, do think that it's a very general area where, you complete the NIST framework, you have your checklist, and instantly my organization is secure. That's definitely not the case here. Definitely not the case at the Center of Excellence here. We're very innovative. We're continuing to be on top of the cyber trends.
And I think what you guys are doing is amazing. So hands off, my hat's off to you and the team. Keep up the amazing work.
Thanks very much, Scott. I'm sure my team who's tuning in right now is giving themselves a pat on the shoulder, which they should. So at this point here, guys, this concludes our Cyber Talk session. A special thank you to you, Scott, for coming onto the show and giving your time and your expertise. I know we've gone a little bit over time today, but I hope that everyone here was able to learn a little bit more about cyber crimes and some methods on how to prevent them. So do feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section. We read every comment. And as always, it's important to stay on top of cybersecurity best practices to keep yourself and those around safe. If we didn't get to your questions yet, as you heard, Scott is open to you connecting with him on LinkedIn. So am I. So do ask your questions there or go to CyberX. So I encourage everyone to keep coming back and learning about cybersecurity with us on the Cyber Talk Show with me, Julia Lee. Stay cyber safe and see you soon.